April 22, 1943, outside the Detroit Arsenal tank plant, Warren, Michigan. The Wehrmacht intelligence report would never adequately explain what German commanders witnessed unfolding across European battlefields. American Sherman tanks appearing in numbers that defied every calculation of industrial capacity the German High Command had made. Through the smoke and chaos of the North African campaign, across Sicily's mountainous terrain, and eventually through France's hedgerows, a torrent of American armor overwhelmed German positions with sheer numerical superiority that seemed impossible. German intelligence officers studying captured Sherman tanks found something that challenged their fundamental assumptions about military production. These machines bore the marks of precise assembly, quality welding, and meticulous construction that should have required master craftsmen with decades of experience. Yet intercepted American communications and prisoner interrogations revealed something the Wehrmacht refused to believe. The tanks crushing German defensive positions weren't built by the skilled metalworkers and veteran machinists Germany relied upon. They were built by American women who, just months earlier, had been secretaries, telephone operators, housewives, and shop clerks. Inside the massive Detroit Arsenal tank plant, a revolutionary transformation of warfare was taking place. Women operated drill presses, their bandanas keeping hair away from the machinery. They guided overhead cranes carrying 30-ton tank hulls with surgical precision. Rose Will Monroe, a widow from Kentucky who worked at the nearby Willow Run aircraft plant, would become the face of millions of women war workers when she was discovered by actor Walter Pidgeon and featured in promotional films as Rosie the Riveter. These women, and millions like them across America, represented the most profound miscalculation in Nazi strategic thinking. While German military doctrine dismissed women as incapable of heavy industrial work, American production lines were proving that gender had nothing to do with manufacturing capacity. The statistics hidden from German intelligence revealed the magnitude of their error. By 1944, women comprised 1/3 of all American manufacturing workers. At tank production facilities across the nation, female workers operated lathes cutting armor steel to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. At Fisher Body Grand Blanc Arsenal, women assembled complex tank components. At Chrysler's tank engine facilities, they built the Ford GAAV-8 engines, and Chrysler A-57 multibank engines that powered Sherman tanks. The transformation began on December 7, 1941, when the attack on Pearl Harbor shattered America's isolationist stance. Within weeks, 16 million American men would enter military service, creating the greatest labor shortage in the nation's history. War Production Board Chairman Donald Nelson faced an impossible equation. President Roosevelt demanded 45,000 tanks in 1942, 75,000 in 1943, along with 60,000 aircraft in 1943, 1942, and 125,000 in 1943. The workforce needed to achieve these goals simply didn't exist among the remaining male population. The solution emerged from necessity rather than progressive ideology. On January 12, 1942, the War Manpower Commission launched the most ambitious recruitment campaign in history. Posters appeared in every American city showing a determined woman flexing her bicep with the slogan, "We can do it." The image, created by artist J. Howard Miller for Westinghouse, would become iconic, though later mistakenly attributed to Geraldine Hough Doyle, who worked only briefly at American Brooch and Machine Company in Ann Arbor before quitting to protect her cello-playing hands. The poster represented millions of women who stayed in factories throughout the war. Behind the propaganda lay a carefully orchestrated industrial revolution that would transform not just American society, but the mathematics of global warfare. At the Detroit Arsenal tank plant, this transformation took concrete form. The facility, designed by architect Albert Kahn and covering 113 acres, had been built in just 6 months during 1940 and 1941. Chrysler Corporation, which operated the plant for the government, faced the challenge of training thousands of workers who had never seen the inside of a factory. The first M3 Grant tank had rolled off the line on April 24, 1941, before the buildings were even complete. By 1942, the plant needed to transition to M4 Sherman production, while simultaneously expanding its workforce by 400%. Training programs designed specifically for women emerged at unprecedented speed. The Engineering, Science and Management War Training Program, established through the U.S. Office of Education, created intensive courses teaching women to read blueprints, operate machinery, and understand metallurgy. At Detroit Arsenal, women learned to operate turret lathes, milling machines, and precision grinders in programs compressed from the traditional 4-year apprenticeships to just 8 weeks. Virginia Davis, who moved to Detroit from rural Tennessee for war work, later recalled learning to operate a vertical boring mill that carved tank turret rings from solid steel. The precision required was extraordinary. Tank turret races had to be machined to tolerances of plus or minus 0.002 inches to ensure smooth rotation under combat conditions. The integration of women into tank production required fundamental redesigns of factory processes. Traditional manufacturing assumed workers could lift heavy components manually. With women comprising significant portions of the workforce, factories installed overhead cranes, chain hoists, and mechanical assists throughout production lines. Workstations were reconfigured to accommodate workers of different heights. Tool designs were modified for smaller hands. These adaptations, initially seen as accommodations, actually increased overall production efficiency for all workers. German intelligence consistently underestimated American production capacity because they applied their own cultural assumptions to American capabilities. Nazi ideology, articulated in countless propaganda pieces, held that women's primary role was producing children for the Reich. While some German women worked in factories, particularly later in the war, they never exceeded 14 million workers throughout the conflict, the same number as 1939. The idea that American women could master precision manufacturing was literally unthinkable within Nazi ideological frameworks. When Hitler's economic advisors calculated American industrial potential in 1940, they based their estimates on male workforce participation only. Fritz Todt, the Reich Minister for Armaments and Production until 1942, dismissed American production goals as propaganda, stating that the numbers were technically impossible given America's skilled worker population. Albert Speer, who succeeded Todt, maintained similar assumptions, even as evidence mounted that American production was exceeding every German estimate. The reality unfolding in American factories defied these calculations. At Cadillac's Detroit tank plant, which had converted from luxury car production in just 55 days, women operated the fixtures that held tank transmissions during precision machining. These transmissions, which had to withstand the enormous torque of tank engines while enabling precise control in combat, required assembly tolerances that exceeded those of any automobile. Women operating Blanchard grinders finished transmission housings to mirror smoothness. A single imperfection could cause transmission failure in combat, potentially dooming an entire tank crew. By March 1943, American tank production reached extraordinary levels. The Detroit Arsenal alone was producing tanks at rates that seemed impossible to German observers. In December 1942, the plant had set a production record with 896 tanks delivered in a single month. But Detroit was just one of 11 major tank production facilities. Fisher Body Grand Blanc Arsenal, also in Michigan, added its production capacity. The Lima Locomotive Works in Ohio, Pressed Steel Car Company in Pennsylvania, and Pacific Car and Foundry in Washington all contributed to a total that would eventually reach approximately 50,000 Sherman tanks during the war. The qualitative impact of female workers extended beyond mere numbers. Studies conducted by the War Production Board in 1943 found that women workers in precision operations actually exceeded male workers in several critical metrics. Women demonstrated superior performance in tasks requiring fine motor control, attention to detail, and sustained concentration. Rejection rates for components manufactured by predominantly female work teams were consistently lower than pre-war male-dominated production lines. At the Chrysler tank engine plant, engines assembled by teams with high female participation showed 15% fewer defects requiring post-assembly correction. This quality advantage manifested on battlefields across the globe. Wehrmacht after-action reports from Tunisia in early 1943 noted the reliability of American tanks, which seemed to suffer fewer mechanical breakdowns than German vehicles, despite the harsh desert conditions. What German analysts didn't understand was that this reliability stemmed partly from the meticulous assembly work performed by women who brought different skills and perspectives to manufacturing. Many women had experience with detailed handwork from sewing, which translated into exceptional ability in tasks like electrical system assembly, where hundreds of connections had to be perfect. June 6, 1944, D-Day. As Sherman tanks rolled off landing craft onto Normandy beaches, German defenders faced the physical manifestation of American women's industrial might. The 21st Panzer Division, stationed near Caen, reported engaging overwhelming numbers of American tanks. In a single day, more American tanks landed in Normandy than Germany would produce in the entire month. The mathematics of attrition had shifted decisively against the Wehrmacht. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, inspecting Atlantic wall defences months before the invasion, had warned that the Allies' material superiority would prove decisive. But even Rommel underestimated the scale of American production. His calculations, based on traditional assumptions about industrial capacity, failed to account for millions of American women transforming themselves into skilled industrial workers. The German General Staff's planning for Normandy assumed Americans could sustain losses of perhaps 50 tanks daily before requiring operational pause. In reality, American production was replacing losses at 3 times that rate. The Sherman tank itself became a symbol of this production philosophy. While German tanks like the Panther and Tiger were superior in armor and firepower, they were complex machines requiring skilled craftsmen for production. A Tiger tank required 300,000 man-hours to produce. A Sherman required just 10,000 person-hours, and those persons were increasingly women working in rationalized production systems. The Detroit Arsenal's assembly line, modeled on automobile production, broke tank assembly into discrete steps that could be mastered quickly. Women who had never held industrial tools became proficient in specific operations within weeks. The psychological impact on German forces transcended mere numbers. Tank commanders who had trained for years to master their craft faced opponents whose tanks were built by workers with months of experience. SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann, Germany's most celebrated tank ace, reportedly expressed frustration that superior German tanks were being overwhelmed by mass-produced American machines. What Wittmann and others couldn't comprehend was that mass production didn't mean inferior quality when performed by motivated, well-trained workers regardless of gender. American innovations in production training created multiplicative effects. The Training Within Industry program, launched in 1940, developed methods to quickly train workers in specific skills. The job instruction training component taught experienced workers how to train newcomers effectively. Women who mastered operations became trainers themselves, creating exponential growth in skilled workforce. By 1943, newly hired women workers at Detroit Arsenal achieved production proficiency in 6 weeks that had previously required 6 months. The integration of women into war production also drove technological innovation. The need to accommodate workers of different physical capabilities led to development of powered tools and mechanical assists that increased overall productivity. Pneumatic riveting guns, developed to enable women to drive larger rivets, increased riveting speed for all workers by 40%. Overhead crane systems, installed to help women move heavy components, reduced injury rates and increased production flow efficiency. These innovations, born from necessity, revolutionized American manufacturing permanently. German intelligence failures regarding American women workers reflected deeper misconceptions. Intercepted communications from the German embassy in Buenos Aires to Berlin in 1943 dismissed reports of American production figures as impossible exaggerations. The report stated that achieving such production would require abandoning all pretense of civilized social order. The concept that women could perform heavy industrial work efficiently was so antithetical to Nazi doctrine that accurate intelligence was dismissed as enemy propaganda. Meanwhile, American production accelerated beyond even optimistic projections. By September 1943, the United States was producing more tanks monthly than Germany produced quarterly. The disparity grew more extreme as the war progressed. In 1944, while American factories produced 17,500 Sherman tanks, Germany managed approximately 6,500 tanks, total of all types. German tactical superiority and individual tank quality became irrelevant when facing opponents who could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. The Battle of Arcourt in September 1944 demonstrated this reality starkly. The 4th Armoured Division faced multiple German panzer brigades equipped with superior Panther tanks. German doctrine emphasized the Panther's advantages: thicker armor, more powerful gun, better optics. Yet the Americans destroyed 281 German armored vehicles while losing just 41 Shermans. The difference lay not in individual tank quality, but in systemic advantages: better logistics, superior maintenance, effective combined arms tactics, and above all, the ability to replace losses immediately from the endless stream of production flowing from American factories. That production stream depended increasingly on women workers. By late 1944, women comprised significant percentages of workers in American tank plants. These women weren't filling secondary positions. They operated the entire range of manufacturing equipment. They operated Cincinnati milling machines cutting tank suspension components. They led teams assembling final drive units. They supervised quality control for turret assemblies. The social transformation accompanying this industrial revolution was profound, but often hidden from German observation. American factories established child care centers to enable mothers to work. The Kaiser Corporation pioneered on-site nurseries at its shipyards, a model copied by tank manufacturers. Child care facilities near the Detroit Arsenal served hundreds of children daily. These facilities, unimaginable in Nazi Germany where motherhood was glorified as women's primary role, enabled America to mobilize its entire population for war production. Transportation systems adapted to serve female workers. Detroit's public transit added special routes serving war plants during shift changes. Companies organized carpooling systems, recognizing that many women didn't own vehicles. Housing projects specifically for women workers emerged near major plants. The Willow Run dormitory complex housed thousands of women workers, complete with cafeterias, recreation facilities, and social services. These systematic adaptations multiplied American production capacity beyond German comprehension. African American women faced double barriers, but nevertheless contributed significantly to war production. Initially excluded from many defense jobs, pressure from civil rights organizations and desperate labor needs opened opportunities. By 1944, 600,000 African American women worked in war production. At many plants, integrated production lines emerged from practical necessity despite social resistance. The tanks didn't discriminate, and neither did the Germans shooting at them. The precision required in tank production challenged assumptions about women's capabilities. Tank armor plate had to be cut and welded to exact specifications. Variations of even fractional inches could create shot traps where enemy shells might penetrate. Women learned arc welding, arguably the most skilled manual trade in tank production. The welding of cast armor sections required understanding metallurgy, heat distribution, and stress patterns. Improper welding could cause catastrophic armor failure in combat. Yet women mastered these skills rapidly, with many becoming certified welders faster than pre-war male apprentices. Quality control, often assigned to women workers due to assumptions about their attention to detail, became a critical advantage. Every Sherman tank underwent thousands of individual inspections during production. Women inspectors checked tolerances, tested systems, and verified assembly procedures with meticulous precision. German tanks, built by increasingly conscripted and slave labor as the war progressed, suffered declining quality. American tanks, built by motivated women workers earning unprecedented wages, maintained consistent quality even as production volumes soared. The economic implications transformed American society. Women's average wages in manufacturing increased dramatically during the war years. For the first time, millions of women earned independent incomes. This economic independence, though challenged post-war, planted seeds of social change that would bloom in subsequent decades. German observers, when they noticed at all, dismissed this as social decay rather than recognizing it as mobilization of previously untapped human resources. German production, constrained by ideology, never achieved similar mobilization. While 14 million German women remained in the workforce throughout the war, most worked in traditional roles: agriculture, domestic service, clerical positions. Even as Germany faced catastrophic labor shortages by 1943, Nazi ideology prevented full mobilization of women for industrial production. Hitler personally rejected proposals to conscript women for factory work, declaring it would damage the German woman's honor. December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. As German forces launched their last major offensive, American production superiority proved decisive. The Wehrmacht's carefully husbanded reserve of 1,400 tanks faced Americans who could afford to be profligate with armor. When the 101st Airborne was surrounded at Bastogne, relief columns included hundreds of Shermans rushed from depots supplied by continuous production. German forces, unable to replace losses, saw their offensive power erode daily. Each destroyed Panther or Tiger represented irreplaceable production capacity. Each destroyed Sherman was replaced within days from production lines where women workers maintained round-the-clock schedules. The mathematics were relentless. In January 1945 alone, American factories produced more tanks than Germany would produce in the entire remaining months of the war. The systemic advantage created by American women workers extended beyond mere production to encompass the entire logistics chain supporting mechanized warfare. March 1945, as American forces crossed the Rhine, the full magnitude of production disparity became undeniable. The U.S. 3rd Armored Division alone possessed more operational tanks than entire German army groups. Behind each American armored thrust stood the invisible army of women workers maintaining production rates that seemed impossible. The Detroit arsenal had produced 22,234 tanks during the war, approximately 25% of all American tank production. Fisher Body and other plants added thousands more. This combined output exceeded the Wehrmacht's entire production several times over. German tank crews, increasingly composed of hastily trained Hitler Youth and elderly Volkssturm, faced American tanks manned by crews trained in mass-produced simulators and supplied with vehicles built to standardized specifications. The individual superiority of German tanks became tactically irrelevant when American forces could simply overwhelm any position through numerical superiority backed by inexhaustible replacement capability. Post-war analysis revealed the full scope of German intelligence failures. The Wehrmacht never understood that by 1944, women comprised approximately one-third of all American manufacturing workers, with even higher percentages in some defense sectors. German planning assumed American production depended on a finite pool of skilled male workers who would eventually be exhausted through military conscription. The reality that America had effectively doubled its skilled workforce by training women invalidated every German calculation about sustainable production rates. April 1945, the final weeks of the Third Reich. American armored divisions raced through Germany, encountering sporadic resistance from isolated German units equipped with whatever vehicles remained operational. The Wehrmacht's tank force, once the terror of Europe, had been reduced to scattered remnants facing an endless stream of American armor. The society that had dismissed women's industrial capabilities was being crushed by the products of women's labor. May 8, 1945. WWII Day. As Germany surrendered unconditionally, American production lines were still running at full capacity. The Detroit arsenal alone had produced its 22,234 tanks during the war, a quarter of American tank production. Women workers at plants across the nation had directly manufactured tens of thousands of these vehicles. Each tank represented not just steel and machinery, but the transformation of American society. The German General Staff's final assessments acknowledged American material superiority, but still failed to understand its origins. Even facing national destruction, German military leaders couldn't conceptualize that their defeats had been inflicted significantly by weapons built by women. German officers attributed American production to superior resources, better organization, or geographical advantages, anything except the mobilization of female industrial capability. The immediate post-war period saw attempts to reverse women's industrial participation. Returning veterans needed jobs, and social pressure mounted for women to return to domestic roles. Yet the demonstration of capability couldn't be erased. Millions of women had proven themselves capable of the most demanding industrial work. Rose Will Monroe, the iconic Rosie the Riveter, exemplified this transformation. After the war, she used her savings to start a construction company, then learned to fly, becoming a pilot at age 50. Her trajectory from widowed mother to industrial, worker to entrepreneur represented possibilities that pre-war society hadn't imagined. German society, rigidly maintaining traditional gender roles even during total war, had handicapped itself by refusing to mobilize half its human resources. Historical analysis reveals the strategic magnitude of German miscalculation. Nazi ideology's dismissal of women's industrial capability cost Germany approximately 20 million potential worker years during the conflict. Had Germany mobilized women for industrial production matching American percentages, Wehrmacht equipment shortages might have been significantly reduced. The demonstration that gender didn't determine industrial capability challenged assumptions extending far beyond factory floors. German defeat on battlefields from Normandy to Berlin had been sealed in factories across America, where women proved capability transcended gender. In the final analysis, German generals never knew that American women were building the tanks that crushed the Wehrmacht, because such knowledge was incompatible with Nazi ideology. This willful blindness cost Germany the war as surely as any battlefield defeat. The arsenal of democracy had been built significantly by citizens' German doctrine dismissed as irrelevant to military power. The women who built tanks that crushed the Wehrmacht proved that in modern industrial warfare, the society that mobilizes all its human resources defeats the society that arbitrarily limits participation. German generals never knew American women were building the tanks that defeated them, and that ignorance symbolized the intellectual poverty of fascist ideology confronting democratic mobilization. The strongest armor couldn't protect against the strategic blindness of dismissing half of humanity's potential.